We have seen the clause 8.2.1 of IS 800 2007, and how to use this formula and all we'll see when we take up some numerical examples on this. Now this formula is actually for the prismatic members made up of standard rolled I sections and welded doubly symmetric I sections. Now this is for the doubly symmetric prismatic sections. This formula can be used and the terms remain same, that is Iy, Iw and It are the moment of inertia about minor axis, warping constant and sand pendant torsion constant of the cross section respectively, and where G is the modulus of rigidity and KL is the effective length against lateral torsional buckling. Now what are actually the factors which will affect the lateral torsional buckling or the lateral stability of a beam? The elastic critical moment MCR as obtained in the previous sections is applicable only to a beam of I section which is simply supported and subjected to end moments. In practical situations, the support conditions, the beam cross section, loading, etc. vary from basic case to case. Now following are the factors on which the lateral stability actually depends. They are support conditions, effective length, a level of application of transverse loads, influence of type of loading, and the effect of cross-sectional shape. We'll see all these things one by one. Now support conditions. The lateral restraint provided by the beam, simply supported conditions assumed in this basic case, is the lowest, and therefore MCR is also the lowest in case of the beam which we have considered, which is simply supported. It is possible by other restraint conditions, either other means other than the simply supported, to obtain higher values of MCR, means the case whatever we are assuming here is actually the very conservative one, or I can say the one which gives the lowest critical moment. To increase that critical moment, we can adopt some other types of restraint conditions, like to get higher values of MCR by changing the support conditions. So I mean to say that it is possible by other restraint conditions to obtain higher values of elastic critical moment for the same structural section, which would result in a better utilization of the section. Now the simply supported condition will actually give you the lower critical moment, which is not actually utilizing the full section capacity of that I section. As lateral buckling involves three kinds of deformations, namely the lateral bending, twisting and warping, it is feasible to think of various types of end conditions so that we can restrict all these moments and we can increase the elastic critical moment of that section. But the support should either completely prevent or offer no resistance to each type of the deformation. They should not give the partial type of deformation or partial type of restraint. Either they should prevent the full deformation or they should allow it free. The effect of various support conditions is taken into account by the way of a parameter called effective length, which is explained in the next section. Okay, the next factor on which the lateral stability of the beam depends is the effective length. The concept of effective length incorporates the various types of support conditions. For the beam with simply supported end conditions and no intermediate lateral restraint, the effective length is actually the effective length can be taken as the actual length between the supports itself, only in case of simply supported beams. When a greater amount of lateral or torsional restraints is provided at supports, the effective length is actually less than the actual length when you provide greater amount of lateral or torsional restraints to the beam. The effective length factor would indirectly account for the increased lateral and torsional rigidities provided by the restraints. So this is how the effective length of a beam affects the lateral instability of the beam. Now if you say the effective length, how it is actually calculated is in this diagram you can see that in simply supported beams with the intermediate. So in these diagrams you can see how actually the effective length can be measured. In simply supported beams, the intermediate lateral restraints against the lateral torsional buckling, the effective length for the lateral torsional buckling, that is whatever that parameter, shall be taken as the length of the relevant segment in between the lateral restraint because you can see here in this diagram the lateral restraint is actually given by these bracing systems, and the length between these lateral restraint is actually taken as the effective length. And in this diagram also, if this is your main beam and the lateral restraint is actually provided by these secondary beams, and the length between these secondary beams is taken as the effective length. Okay, for simply supported beams and girders of span L, where no lateral restraint to the compression flange is provided, but where each end of the beam is restrained against rotation. Means if it is a simply supported beam, each end of that beam will be restrained against the rotation, unlike in case of cantilever beams, where the free end of the cantilever beam is not restrained against the rotation. In such cases where the ends of the beam are restrained against the rotation, the effective length of the lateral buckling shall be taken from this table, which is from IS 800 2007. I will take one simple example here. So when it is for the torsional restraint, when it is fully restrained, and for the warping, both flanges are fully restrained. For the normal loading case, loading condition, you have to take effective length as 0.7 L, and for the destabilizing you have to take it as 0.85 L. And what is that actually destabilizing loading condition? We'll explain that in the coming section. Okay, now the third one, here I will try to explain you the destabilizing loading. Now the level of application of the transverse loads also plays a very important role in the instability of the beams. How it is dependent. The lateral stability of transversely loaded beam is dependent on the arrangement of the loads as well as the level of application of the loads with respect to the centroid of the section. Now here you can see in this diagram, if you take an I section which is symmetrical about both the axes, we know that the CG lies exactly at the center of the I section. Now the figure shows a centrally loaded beam experiencing either destabilizing or restoring effect when the cross section is twisted. Now what happens here? A load apply above the centroid of the cross section. You can see here this case. This is an I section where the CG lies exactly at the center of the I section. When we try to apply the transverse load above the CG of that, what happens? Additional overturning moment and becomes more critical than the case when the load is applied at the center. Now because of this application of the load above the centroid of the I section, the case becomes more critical, and then the load when we apply on the centroid of the I section. Means here what I'm trying to explain you is, when you apply the load above the centroid of an I section, it is much more critical than when you apply the load exactly at the CG of the I section, which you can see in this second case where the load is applied exactly at the CG. When you try to apply the load below the CG, it actually creates a moment called restoring moment, which will avoid the overturning moment, and still more the section becomes safer than the first two cases. So this is how we can understand that the level of application of the transverse loads also plays a very important role in case of destabilizing instability of the beam. Okay, the lateral stability of transversely loaded beam is dependent on the arrangement of the loads as well as the level of application of the loads. Thus a load applied below or above the centroid can change the buckling load by plus or minus 40%. You can just see here, when only the level of application of the load will make a difference of buckling load by plus or minus 40%. The location of the load application has no effect if a restraint is provided at that point, at that load point. Provision of intermediate lateral supports can conveniently increase the lateral stability of the beam, which is obvious one. With a central support which is capable of preventing lateral deflection and twisting, the beam span is halved Okay, it will be divided into two parts, and each span behaves independently. As a result, the rigidity of the beam is considerably increased. Now the influence of type of loading. So far, only the basic case of beams loaded with the equal and opposite end moments has been considered, but this is not the case in reality. The two reasons for studying the basic case in detail are: it is analytically amiable, means it is feasible. The loading condition is regarded as the most severe one as compared to the other. Cases of moment gradient means when we don't have a uniform moment throughout the beam, the moment varies with the length of the beam, that is called the moment gradient. Where the end moments are unequal, are less prone to instability, and this is a beneficial effect, and this beneficial effect is taken into account by the use of equivalent uniform moments. Means it is not so critical when the moment gradient is not uniform, but we have taken this case by considering equal end moments, equal and opposite end moments, which will give the uniform moment gradient, which is actually a severe condition. Now in this case, the basic design procedure is modified by comparing the elastic critical moment for the actual case with the elastic critical moment for the basic case. So that comparison will be done and the design procedure can be done. This process is similar to the effective length concept in case of strut problems for taking into account the end fixity. Now the next one, the effect of cross-sectional shape. The shape of the cross section of a beam is very important parameter while evaluating its lateral buckling capacity. In other words, lateral instability can be reduced or even avoided by choosing appropriate cross sections. The effect of cross-sectional shape on the lateral instability is illustrated below this figure. We'll explain this figure. Okay, now the figure shows that the I section with the the I section with the larger in-plane bending stiffness do not have matching stability. You can see here these two lines indicates the stability, and these two are the I sections itself, but they have different in-plane bending stiffness. It means that this is having some almost stocky kind of a thing, that is depth is less and here the depth is more, so moment of inertia of this I section is more as compared to this one in minor axis. And when you see the box sections with high torsional stiffness are more suitable for the beams. The box sections are actually very much suitable in case of beams because they have lesser they have higher torsional stiffness and they are more susceptible. They are not more susceptible to lateral torsional buckling. However, I sections are commonly used due to their easy availability and ease of connections. Box sections poses some problem in case of connections and their availability. So most of the times we go for I sections only in case of beams. Now the following video will actually give you the better understanding about the lateral torsional buckling. Let me just play that. Okay, you can see here this is the long beam which is being loaded at the center. This graph is actually giving you the vertical deflection in mm, and this graph is giving you the horizontal deflection. You can see here in the initial stages the vertical deflection is kept on increasing, and what will happen to the horizontal deflection you can see here. You can see how the things will change. You can see, yeah, at some point of time the vertical deflection, the horizontal deflection suddenly spikes out and it keeps on increasing. You can see, and there is a twist also, that is a lateral torsional buckling that we call. So this is how you can understand the lateral torsional buckling of a beam. There is a vertical deflection accompanied by the twist. Okay, now coming to the design approach, lateral instability is a prime design consideration for all laterally unsupported beams except for the very stocky ones, where even if we don't have a lateral supports, we don't consider it to be a laterally unsupported beam because it's a very stocky, that is a short one. The value of elastic critical moment is important in assessing their load carrying capacity. There means the beam's load carrying capacity. The non-dimensional modified slenderness, this value indicates the importance of instability and as a result it's the governing mode of failure. Now the design as per IS 800-2007. The new IS 800-2007 follows the same design philosophy with certain alterations in the parameters for calculating design bending strength governed by lateral torsional buckling. The step-by-step design procedure has been detailed below. The design bending strength of a laterally unsupported beam as governed by lateral torsional buckling is given by this formula, that is MD is equal to, that is the design bending strength is given as beta B into ZP, that is the plastic section modulus, multiplied by the FBD, that is design bending stress, and this beta B is 1 for the plastic and compact sections, or it is ZE divided by ZP for a semi-compact sections. You can find that beta B easily. ZP represents the plastic section modulus and ZE represents the elastic section modulus. FBD is the design bending compressive stress obtained as given below. FBD is xi LT Fy divided by gamma MO. Fy is the yield strength of the steel and gamma MO is the partial safety factor. And how to find that xi LT, and this is the formula how we can find that xi LT. This is all given in IS 800-2007 under the clause 8.2.2.1. Now in case of cantilever beams, there is some change in the formula, not exactly a major change, only the slenderness ratio or that effective length will change. So this is a formula which will give you the elastic critical moment for the cantilever beams. Now how to find out this effective length is actually given by this table 16 of IS 800-2007. Let me explain you one row here. Now if this is your cantilever beam, the below one, and if this is the L, that is the span of the cantilever beam, now how you have to take the effective length? Okay, when you see at the top of this beam, if it is free, that is the at the tip, if it is free, you have, under the normal conditions you have to take the effective length as 3L, and under the destabilizing you have to take it as 7.5L. Destabilizing, I mean to say the load which when applied above the centroid. So in that case you have to take it as 7.5L. The lateral restraint to the top flange, when you have provided some lateral restraint to the top flange at the tip. So please read this as not as top, instead you read this as tip. When you provide some lateral restraint at the top flange at the tip, in that case you have to take under normal conditions as 2.7L and under the destabilizing conditions as 7.5L. And if you have provided some torsional restraint at the tip, in that case you have to take it as 2.4L and 4.5L. And when you have provided lateral and torsional restraint, you have to take it as 2.1L and 3.6L. Now this is one case. We have one more case here, and third case and the fourth case. Now what is actually the free? Free refers to there is no restraint provided at the tip of the cantilever beam. So this diagram should not be a correct one. This is as per IS 800. Let me check in case of IS 800. Let me show you that. Okay. So when that is the second one, when lateral restraint at the top, it means you have provided some plate. So this diagram is an incorrect one. This should not be there. And the third one, torsional restraint, is like this. And the fourth one, when you have provided lateral and torsional restraint, it is something like this. Okay, now lateral torsional buckling of continuous beams. Beams extending over a number of spans are normally continuous in vertical, lateral, or in both the planes. In the cases where such continuity is not provided, lateral deflection and twisting may occur. Such a situation is typically experienced in roof purlins before sheeting is provided on top of them and in beams of temporary nature. For these cases, it is always safe to make no assumption about the possible restraints and to design them for maximum effective length itself. Now the another case of interest with regard to lateral buckling is a beam that is continuous in lateral plane, that is beam is divided into several segments in the lateral plane by means of fully effective braces. Effective length of segments will be equal to the spacing of the braces if the spacing and the movement patterns are similar. Otherwise, the effective length of each segment will have to be determined separately. Now the clause 8.3.4 of IS 800-2007 will actually give you the lateral torsional buckling of continuous beams. Where a member is provided intermediate lateral supports to improve the lateral buckling strength, these restraints should have sufficient strength and stiffness to prevent lateral movement of the compression flange at that point relative to the end supports. The intermediate lateral restraint should be either connected to an appropriate bracing system capable of transferring the restraint forces to the effective lateral support at the ends of the member, or should be connected to an independent robust part of the structure capable of transferring the resistant force. Two or more parallel members acquiring such lateral restraint shall not be simply connected together, assuming mutual dependence for lateral restraint. The intermediate lateral restraint should be connected to the member as close to the compression member as practicable. Okay. Now, what is actually the effective lateral restraint? Providing proper lateral bracing may increase the lateral stability of the beam. This is a very obvious one. Lateral bracing may be either discrete, example cross beams. Cross beams are actually called as lateral bracing, or continuous, example beam encased in a concrete floor. You can see here. This is the secondary beams which are giving a discrete lateral restraint, and when the top flange with the studs are actually encased in the concrete floors will actually give you the continuous lateral restraint. It is important to note that in hogging moment regions of continuous beam, if the compression flange, that is a bottom flange, is not properly restrained, in case of hogging condition, the bottom flange becomes the compression flange and the top flange becomes the tension flange. A form of lateral deflection with cross-sectional distortion would occur. Generally, even a light bracing has the ability to provide the substantial increase in the stability. There are several ways of arranging lateral bracing to improve the stability. So these are the very here you can see the cross beams are actually giving the lateral restraint, and this is the bracing system which will actually improve the lateral stability of the beam to the great extent. So this is the one type of a diagonal bracing which are provided to improve the lateral stability of the beams. The limiting value of the lateral bracing stiffness is influenced by the following parameters. Level of attachment of the brace to the beam, that is either has it been attached to the top flange or the bottom flange. The type of the loading on the beam, notably the level of application of the transverse load, because whether you are applying the transverse load at the CG, below the CG, or on top of CG. Type of connection, whether the capable of resisting lateral and torsional deformation. The proportion of the beam. The provision of bracing to tension flanges is not so effective as compression flange bracing, because the main instability occurs in case of compression flange and not in the tension flange. So always if you connect the bracings to the top flange, I mean to say the compression flange, it will be much more effective. Bracing provided below the point of application of the transverse load would not be able to resist twisting, and hence full capacity of the beam is not achieved. For the design of effective lateral bracing systems, the following two requirements are very much essential. Bracing should be of sufficient stiffness so that buckling occurs between the braces. Lateral bracing should have sufficient strength to withstand the force transferred by the beam. Now, in case of continuous bracing, in a framed building construction, the concrete floor provides an effective continuous lateral restraint to the beam. As a result, The beam may be designed using in-plane strength only, and no need to go for checking the elastic critical moment. A few examples of a fully restrained beam are as shown in the figure below. This is the first case is the where the beam is fully encased in the concrete. The second one is the beam in friction connection with the concrete, and the third one is the beam with the metal decking, that is the shear studs, and with the metal decking it has been continuously restrained against the lateral torsional buckling. So for monosymmetric beams, it is a very complicated thing, so you can refer Annex E in conjunction with the clause 8.2.2.1 of IS 800/2007 to understand the buckling of the monosymmetric beams. Now the buckling of non-uniform beams. Non-uniform beams are often used in situations where the strong axis bending moment varies along the length of the beam. They are found to be more efficient than beams of uniform sections in such situations. The non-uniformity of beams may be obtained in several ways, like rectangular sections generally have tapered in their depths, like in case of pre-engineered buildings. I-beams may be tapered in their depths, or flange width, flange thickness is generally kept constant. Steps in flange width or flange thickness are also common. These all comes under pre-engineered buildings. Non-uniform beams are often used in situations where the strong axis bending moment varies along the length of the beam. Now there is also a concept of shear center, which will actually give you the more detailed or the more intuitive view about the lateral torsional buckling. Let me explain you that. In this section, we'll consider the effect of applying the shear along a principal centroidal axis that is not an axis of symmetry. A typical example of this case is a channel section shown in the figure below. Here it is a cantilevered from the fixed support and is subjected to a force P as shown in this figure. If the force is applied along the once vertical unsymmetrical axis that passes through the centroid C of the cross section, the channel will not only bend downwards but it will also twist clockwise as shown in the figure. You can see here when you try to apply the load, the channel section not only bends but it also deflects. Now in order to prevent this kind of twisting, it is therefore necessary to apply load P at a point O located at an eccentric distance E from the web of the channel. You can see here you have to apply the load P at a point O which is at an eccentric distance E from the web of the channel. So when you apply in such case, the beam only bends and it will not twist. Now the point O so located is called the shear center, or also it is called as a flexural center. When P is applied at the shear center, the beam will only deflect and it will not twist. Now the concept of shear center, important points which need to be remembered are: the shear center is a point through which a force can be applied which will cause a beam to bend and yet not twist. The shear center will always lie on an axis of symmetry of the cross section. The location of the shear center is only a function of the geometry of the cross section and does not depend upon the applied loading. So these are the some of the concepts which are very much essential to understand the lateral torsional buckling. There are many more concepts like warping, non-uniform warping, uniform warping, and all those things. Some of the literature textbooks will explain you those things in a detailed manner. So in my next videos, what we'll do is we'll take some numerical examples and we'll try to solve them and find out how to and see how to find the elastic critical moment and how to design the laterally unsupported beams. So till then, thank you. Bye.